Night falls, and the magic of words is burning firefly-like in the darkness. I'm the Gargoyle, your host for this evening session. Coming up in the darkness, we have Tatum by J. Collins. So sit back and enjoy. And as always, the focus is on the words, never on the person behind the camera. And if you like this video, please consider subscribing, ringing that bell, and telling your friends. I am the Gargoyle, your reader on the ledge. Chapter 1. Something had happened to me. Something was still happening to me. Something bad. Where was I? Where was my home? I felt strange. I couldn't move. I could hear people around me. There was quiet talking. Panic hit me. Was I dead or in a hospital in a coma? I could feel something changing inside me. My body was weak and yet felt like it was strong. That made no sense. My blood pumped in my veins and my heart throbbed. It felt new and yet familiar. Someone pressed cool fingers to my throat, checking my pulse. I'm alive! I wanted to scream. Nothing came out. Nothing worked. What had they done to me? I felt something warm being poured down my throat. It tasted like heaven and hell all at once. It was warm and rich and oddly metallic, but somehow divine. I felt my body surging into life. My fingers twitched. They really did. He moved. My beautiful boy, someone whispered. A woman? I could finally make out words. Was I about to awake from this hellish nightmare at last? A gruff man's voice muttered. I'll leave him in your capable hands, my love. Enjoy. I heard the door close, and then the conversation continued, as if he hadn't spoken at all. Of course he moved. He's strong, just like I knew he would be. At last, come back to me, Ezra. What those words meant. Sorry, just lost my place there for a second. What those words meant, I had no idea. But I was sensing that this person, this woman, was somehow responsible for what was happening to me. I'd kill her first. Somewhere inside my mind, I gasped. Where had such a thought come from? It was a jarring, an evil thought. It wasn't me. What was happening? Was there someone else inside me now? Or was I losing my mind? With my family history, it was probably the latter. Oh, how I hoped to avoid that. Chapter 2. They sat me up in the strange bed. These strangers who felt they had a right to lay hands on me. They had used some kind of rope to afflict my hands and feet in a manner which left me unable to fight them, although they had loosened it just enough to move me, and something inside of me really wanted to fight them and cause them much pain and terror like that which they had caused me. He needs more, the small man muttered, and then smirked when the woman turned to snap at him. I'm fully aware of that. I know what I'm doing. The man laughed, although she seemed powerful and strangely in charge of him. She brought me a squat glass of something dark red, and I eagerly watched it approach. It looked strangely like blood, but my stomach growled at the sight of it. Why would my stomach welcome the idea of something so distasteful? She smiled when I looked up at her in sudden confusion and disgust. Hush, child. When you taste heaven, you will realize you are home, where you belong. She seemed oddly familiar, as did her voice. When she held the glass to my lips, I kept my eyes on her as I sipped it, unable to hide my grimace at the mere thought of such a thing. It should have been the most horrific taste, but instead, it really did taste heavenly. It was warm and smooth and lush as I sipped more quickly, gulping it all away. There was a slight metallic hint to it, but not as strong as I had tasted before. I tasted blood before? When? Wait! Was I drinking blood? Chapter 2. The Event. They set me up in the strange bed, these strangers who felt they had a right to lay hands on me. They'd used some kind of rope to affix my hands and feet in a manner which left me unable to fight them, although they had loosened it just enough to move me, and something inside of me really wanted to fight them and cause them much pain and terror, like that which they had caused me. He needs more, a small man muttered, and then smirked, when the woman turned to snap at him. I'm fully aware of that. I know what I'm doing. The man laughed, although she seemed powerful and strangely in charge of him. She brought me a squat glass of something dark red, and I eagerly watched it approach. It looked strangely like blood, but my stomach growled at the sight of it. Why would my stomach welcome the idea of something so distasteful? She smiled when I looked up at her in sudden confusion and disgust. Hush, child. When you taste heaven, you will realize you are home, where you belong. She seemed oddly familiar, as did her voice. When she held the glass to my lips, I kept my eyes on her as I sipped it, unable to hide my grimace at the mere thought of such a thing. It should have been the most horrific taste, but instead, it really did taste heavenly. It was warm and smooth and lush as I sipped more quickly, gulping it all away. There was a slight metallic hint to it, but not as strong as I had tasted before. I tasted blood before? When? Wait! Was I drinking blood? Chapter 3. 3 weeks before the event. What do you mean you're leaving? Have you taken leave of your senses now too? I frowned as I stared back at Mrs. Godfrey. I couldn't believe she would be so cruel. That she could be. She who had been like a mother to me. How can you ask me that? You know how much, very much, I fear it. Her face softened as she leaned over to stroke my hair from my eyes. It was always too unruly and irritated me at times. But ladies somehow seemed to like it. So I kept it that way. It was like staring through a pale cloud right now again, though, having stubbornly fallen straight into my eyes again. So I pushed it back with frustration. I'm sorry, son. I know this is a frightening time for you, but running away is never the answer. You know that. You will be safer here with me. You will need me when it happens. I took the old lady's hand, gently lifting it from her teacup, clasping both of mine around it. Mrs. Godfrey, you have done more for me than you'll ever know. You have been a mother, a grandmother, and a best friend. You've looked after father and uncle, and you've never once allowed me to fall into the pit of despair I see before me with my cursed future. But you have to see, to understand. This is my only chance to see more of this world, while I can still take care of myself and remember what I see. I can build memories and write them down. I can live and remember, relive before I wither away. I hoped that my fervor would convince her. My unofficial adopted mother brushed a tear away with her free hand. I fear for you, son. You're barely 21 and you've had such a difficult life already. I can see that an adventure would help to heal some of those wounds. But what if the fugue hits while you're away and alone? Who would care for you? Who would see you home to us? I frowned. That would indeed be terrifying, but it was truly more terrifying than staying here to watch them die, knowing that I would soon suffer the same fate. Was anything more so? I felt the familiar panic rising. I had to make my break for freedom before she or I weakened my resolve. If not, I could end up trapped here and in my mind forever. Please, Mrs. Godfrey, I will be sure to send letters home as often as I can. She shook her head, more tears slipping down her cheeks. I felt terrible. I didn't want to hurt this wonderful woman. That had never been my intention. She had been my savior. She deserved better. If you had any other future ahead of you, I couldn't allow it. But if this will make you happy, while you still have a chance of it, I cannot stand in your way. I will not. Sudden jubilation began to battle with the panic. Was she freeing me to live while I still could? Could it be? You really mean it? You will let me go? She smiled, but her lips trembled around it. You must live, boy, now, before it's too late. But you must keep in contact, as you promise. I must know you are well and happy. And you must promise to return before you are rendered incapable of doing so without help. I stood and pulled her gently from her seat so I could hug her. It wasn't really like me to do such things, to show such familiarity, but she had just granted me my second biggest wish ever. I wouldn't forget it. I wouldn't forget her. I wouldn't. I couldn't. Chapter 4. A day later. My bags were loaded onto the horse-drawn wagon, and I climbed aboard. I waved to Mrs. Godfrey as we trundled away, feeling a wave of excitement and hope. My adventure was starting right now. Is it true what they say? A girl's voice asked, and my heart sank. I was trying to leave my troubles behind, striving for a new start, a chance at a future, any future but mine. I didn't want to talk about my horrific family legacy. I sighed inwardly, closing my eyes for a second to fortify myself. You can really read minds? You are the one? She prompted, and I turned to look at her, surprise shaking me free of my desire to hide from everyone. She had not been referring to my dire future at all. Hello, she smiled, and squeezed into the narrow seat beside me. I'm Talia. I stared at her, taking in her beauty, as she sat and waited for my response. Her lips were full and curved in the most delightful smile. Her hair was a soft, light blonde, much like mine, and so very long and free. I ached to run my fingers through it, or wrap it around my hand to pull her close for a kiss. Such forbidden desires surprised me too. A sudden twitch in that very private area of my body shocked me back into reality. I couldn't let her see my attraction, for surely she would laugh in my face, or slap it, scandalized by my villainous intentions. I apologize. I'm afraid I lost my manners for a moment. I'm Ezra. She took my hand as I offered it, squeezing it lightly. Her skin was so soft, I almost lost myself to more of my undesirable thoughts, as if I could be worthy of such a beauty. So, can you? She asked, as she retrieved her hand and rested it in her lap. I fought to keep my eyes on her face rather than to follow her hand. Can I what? I'm sorry. My mind is a little slow today. She laughed, and it, like her face, was full of beauty. Oh, to have this beautiful woman as mine. She lightly swatted my shoulder as she reminded me of her inquiry. They say you can read minds, or the future, or something like that. Can you? I grinned, suddenly feeling carefree for perhaps the first time in my life. I was on my adventure after all. Every moment wasted would be a moment lost forever. Likewise, every wasted opportunity. I took her hand again, turning it over to gaze at her flawless palm. She giggled, but didn't pull away. Should I tell you that your future is with me, that we will fall hopelessly in love and live happily ever after? How did I have the courage to even utter such words, to make such scandalous assumptions? But she did not run, nor did she laugh. She simply smiled wildly. If you did, I might ask how you plan to woo me into this bliss you mention. My eyes widened at her words. She really wasn't running from me, as they always ran. In the end, my dire future was always too much for them. And who could blame them? It was certainly too much for me. I had no such option for escape. Did I offend you? She asked suddenly, her hand gently squeezing mine again. I blinked away those unwelcome thoughts and forced a smile. Not at all, Talia. I was simply trying to decide if you would prefer flowers or perfume. She laughed again. You wouldn't need such things to woo me, Ezra. There is something about you that already has me fascinated. It was a good start, so I tried not to press my luck, for surely if I had, it would be short lived, as I was destined to be myself. I don't actually read futures or minds. It's more like I get a sense of how a person is feeling. Sometimes it can help me to elicit their thoughts by way of deduction. She looked impressed, turning in her seat so she could more easily look into my eyes. She added a slight tilt to her head. All it did was make me want to kiss her. She was aligning her lips just perfectly for me. I wondered if she realized this fact and if it fueled her actions in any way. How so? She asked. I forced myself to think before I replied, since the reply, which came immediately to mind, was to explain that her lips were now at the perfect angle for me to swoop in and claim them. I realized just in time, however, that she wasn't asking that. How could she? She shouldn't. It wouldn't be proper. She couldn't know that I was secretly coveting her. She couldn't know that I wanted to take her somewhere quiet and peel away those layers of clothing until I could lay my hands upon the soft flesh beneath them. Honestly, I'd rather think hearing thoughts would be easier for me. It takes some work and effort to deduce thoughts based on circumstances and surroundings and facial expressions. She frowned. Okay, so do me. Oh, how I wished. I cleared my throat as I surreptitiously adjusted my seating position to become more comfortable. I did not wish to cause offense or upset this beautiful girl. Well, you're interested in my gift, and how it works. So you may simply be thinking that there are thoughts you wouldn't want me to pick up on. Many people fear that I can lift their very words or thoughts from their minds. That is not the case. You may be thinking that this journey is rather bumpy right now. I'd rather think you're not, though. Where was I going with this? Her lips pursed, and I saw a quirk of amusement. So perhaps I would press my luck after all. This was my only opportunity for adventure after all. Maybe I had courage enough for this. If you enjoyed the story, please check the link below that you can check out more of Jay Collins's work. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, check below. I have posted the link in the comments. I really hope you enjoyed that story and our time together. As always, I am the Gargoyle, your reader on the ledge.